President Trump has been in meetings today with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, along with European leaders, and literally just a couple of minutes ago, I was informed that it appears as though the meeting has come to an end. So today's meetings, as we all know, followed the meetings that took place Friday between Trump and Russian President Putin in Alaska, which our administration says was a game-changing meeting. So what are the takeaways that we know so far from today's meeting? Well, here to share what he's been tracking is Phil Wegmann. He's the White House reporter for Real Clear Politics. Phil, welcome back to Washington Watch. It's great to have you.
Thank you. Well,
I know
right
you've
away.
been, yeah, go ahead. You've been tracking this. Tell us what you know so far.
What I know so far is that this administration and European allies have been having meetings about meetings in order to set up future meetings. And one thing that is truly remarkable here is that it's even happening at all. If you rewind the clock to February of this year, it wasn't that long ago when Ukrainian President Zelensky was thrown out of the Oval Office after he tangled with President Trump and Vice President Vance. Today, that didn't happen. Instead, as you noted, not only does this administration say that they have moved the ball towards peace, you had some of these European leaders, like the German Chancellor, agreeing with him. Now they're talking about the potential for a trilateral meeting between Vladimir Putin of Russia, Zelensky of Ukraine, and right there, smack dab in the middle of all of it, is Donald Trump. I think the thing that we can say consistently right now, because we don't know exactly what consensus Trump and today's delegation landed on. But what we can say consistently is that Trump is mercurial in his methods. He's sort of moved back and forth on a couple different issues previously, but he's consistent in wanting to get this thing to end. And as of right now, all parties seem to agree that we might be coming to the end of the beginning of the peace process.
Wow, that is amazing news. And as I said, they just literally, just moments ago, seemed to wrap this thing up. So this is something you've been tracking all day. So that's great to hear. Let me go back real quickly, if I can, Phil, with the meeting that took place Friday. Unpack for us, were there any things that came out of that made the meeting today a little iffy with going into it, as far as maybe some security guarantees or any other sticking points that might have been hurdles going into today?
That is the thrust of the issue here. You hit the nail right on the head, because there are two things that have emerged. First, from that Friday meeting, we got word that the U.S. security guarantees might not be a sticking point for Putin. But then we saw President Trump walk away from this demand for a ceasefire. This is interesting because previously the president had indicated that U.S. security guarantees would be through this minerals deal, that we would have a commercial interest over there, and as a result, Russia would not want to reinvade the country. A lot of Europeans really doubted that, but this time around, Trump hasn't ruled out the possibility of sending U.S. peacekeepers, and we're not certain where the delegation landed. But the big thing, though, is the call for the ceasefire. And for the most part, today's meeting, at least what we got to see of it in the press, was pretty tame. But you had the German Chancellor draw this line in the sand and say that he thought it would be unimaginable to go into that trilateral meeting where, they're actually going to take hammers and tongs to, something enduring to try and get a deal, and they wouldn't have a ceasefire. Donald Trump doesn't like being challenged. We saw that in February. And he sort of shrugged and said, hey, I brought peace and an end to all of these other wars without a ceasefire. I think it'll be okay this time. So we'll wait for a result, but those are the contours of what we're watching.
Very interesting. You brought it up, and I'm glad you did. We don't need to camp out too long on this, I guess. But you mentioned that this meeting went so much better than the last time Zelensky met with Trump. That was a very awkward meeting for everyone involved. But everything that you're hearing from today with the other European leaders, this was much more cordial and productive. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct. And one thing that is notable, it's not definitive, but it gives us a sense of how Zelensky approached this meeting. The guy put on a jacket, no tie, but he wore a suit. Now, that's important, not because of his sartorial decisions. Nobody cares. But it's more important because that was something that bothered Trump last time. Zelensky showed up in his sort of black fatigues, and that rumpled the president. He didn't like that. This time around, Zelensky seems to be, reading the stage directions more. He's not challenging Trump in public. He's not pushing back in public. And I think that it might have taken 8 months for Zelensky, who was really heralded as sort of a Churchillian figure during the Biden administration, to realize that the rules of the game had changed. And in Trump, what he sees is someone who is focused first and foremost on just getting this thing done. I mean, the idea that there would be territory swaps, something that President Trump told me during the signing of a peace agreement with Azerbaijan and Albania. He said, there would be territory swaps. That would be unthinkable during the Biden administration. It's a new paradigm, and we'll see if there's a new result.
Very interesting. So now you mentioned the hopes to have a trilateral meeting now between Trump, Putin, and Zelensky. Any sense of timing on when that might happen?
The president, he likes things to move quickly. He doesn't like to wait around. There's some indication that it could be this week or next week. The White House press corps would be getting a lot of travel miles under their belt. But one thing that we heard from the president definitively is his plans to call Vladimir Putin after this meeting finished today. And the reason I think that is significant is not only was he willing to invite Putin into the United States, the first time he met any Western country since the beginning of this conflict. I mean, remember, this is someone who is regarded as a war criminal for his invasion. But Trump is keeping the lines of communication open. And I think this reflects a different ideology of President Trump. Yes, he has a moralistic foreign policy, all leaders do. But at the end of the day, Trump is not so concerned with the personal character of another nation state. He's concerned with the results. It's much more sort of realpolitik. And again, we'll judge it by the fruits that it bears. Does it bring this war to an end in a just way?
Yeah, good. And, I think that line of communication was illustrated even with the European leaders being here. There were some Democrats in particular who were saying they were here to prevent Trump from bullying Zelensky again. But no, Trump was on the phone with all of them last week, letting them know what was going on. So I thought that, again, was yet another great line of communication. We've only got about a minute or so left, but what do you think perhaps would be the role of the U.S. after some sort of peace deal is struck?
Yeah, that's what we're going to be watching very closely. Donald Trump does not like to commit U.S. troops to any engagement. And so it is a win for the Ukrainians that he hasn't ruled that out just yet. We're going to have to watch that pretty closely here to see if he does send in troops. One thing that I am focused on is Trump likes to see European allies do some of the heavy lifting. He sent arms to Ukraine, but he's made NATO pay for them. Is this a situation where he's willing to get the U.S. more involved, but in sort of an indirect way where the Europeans are taking their fair share of the weight? Well, again, I hate to say it like this, but we'll have to wait and see.
We'll be watching. Phil Wegmann, White House reporter for Real Clear Politics. Thank you so much for being so on the spot with the latest. We appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, sir.